Okay, so what we're doing here today is we're going to do a little demonstration on different types of electrical crimps and soldering and all kinds of things like that. So I've got a number of things here. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you a couple of tools. These are different types of wire strippers. If you look on here, you can see that there's they've got listed there the different sizes of wires: 14 gauge, 16 gauge, 18 gauge, etc. And you've got a crimp down here, and you've got a shear right in here, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and take this white 16 gauge wire, and I'm going to go ahead and show you how to strip first. We can go ahead and put this in the 16 gauge spot right there. So on this side it is solid AWG, and that's stranded AWG. So we're right here. Let me pull that off, and it strips it. If you look at it carefully, hopefully it doesn't cut any of the little wires. You can see the little strands, and there's none that are cut individually, hopefully. Okay, so we can use these as well. Here's another type. It's got the strippers down here, and then up here it has a crimp, and it tells you what size it crimps for and what size it cuts. So I could take this green wire and put it in here where it says 16 and grab that, and it just cuts into the insulation. And when I pull it, now that one you can see, hopefully you can see, I must have used the wrong size because you can see it cut some of the strands of copper down at the base here. Should be able to see those that are cut right there. Let's see if you can see. Yeah, you can see them. So I'm going to use the shear here. Cut that off. And yeah, I was in the wrong hole. I was in the 18 gauge. So there's the 16. It's interesting. It's still cut a little bit there. Let me just see. This is 16 gauge. Yep, it's 16 gauge. So it's funny that I'm getting a little bit of bite into that. So let's check it here. Yeah, it's interesting. It's still grabbing a little bit on this. So this doesn't seem to be as accurate as this one. So when I shear this one off and I put it in the 16 here, sorry, there's the 16. That one, interesting. It didn't pull it off all the way. Okay, so that one did good. So this one seems to be more accurate. Here's another way to do it that I learned from working a summer job at the phone company, was to just take my dikes, just grab and squeeze, and usually I can pull it off without hurting it. Now that one I did get it a little bit, so let me, and sometimes I'll go, that worked out pretty good. Sometimes what I'll do is, let me point this down a little bit so you can see a little better. Sometimes what I'll do is go like this, sort of squeeze it, and twist it around like this, and then pull it, and that works really good. And I find I can do it really well and not get this behind here. Come on, focus. Yeah, and not get any wires cut. So there's a couple different tools. Believe it or not, I have some strippers I really like, but a lot of times I really like to use these. So what I'm going to do first is show you what's called a butt connector. And we'll take a butt connector here, pull that off there. This is a little bit long. Here's a 16 gauge butt connector. So this is a butt connector, and it just joins two wires, and I can push it in there. I'm going to go ahead and cut this one back just to here. And I usually twist them together to kind of make them solid. And I can see when this thing goes in, it's really too long. So I'll cut it shorter. So now when I push it in to there, it's right in the middle. And again, I'll twist it to make it go in the butt connector hole a little better. This is just a way of me crimping this guy into here. So I crimped that down on there. So I got some mechanical force on there. And then I can take the other side. And I'm just doing this in a circle just to show you. Put this guy inside that crimp. I can get him in. Twist him on so it wants to go in. Struggling, Mr. L, struggling. It's one of those places where you don't want your gloves. Except I got a hot soldering iron here and I don't want to burn my hands. I'm going to trim that back just a hair. Okay, put that inside there. There it goes. Take my old crimpers. And crimp that down. Okay, and so I have a connection. Now, it's strictly a mechanical connection squeezing together. And it's okay. Butt connections are okay. But I prefer not to use these because they tend to, or any type of just mechanical connection, because they tend to come back apart. So I'm going to go ahead and just strip that off and squeeze and strip that off. And let's show you some different eyelet connectors. So I've got, for example, a male-female here. This gives me the ability to plug in, plug in and unplug, and I can squeeze those on there. This one gives me the ability to crimp an end on that I can put under a bolt and bolt down. This one's an eyelet. Okay, so I can put under a bolt and bolt down, but again, it's a crimp connector. So I will show you what I like to do. When I go to use these, what I'll often do, let's say I'm going to take this guy and I want to put this connection on here. So I'm going to cut myself a piece of this. Let's say I want to, this is a pretty heavy wire. It's a, I don't know if it's 12 gauge or it's 14 gauge. It says, sorry, what is it? Looks like 12 gauge, but it should say on it. This one says 10 gauge, okay? And this connector is a 10 to 12, so I can put this eyelet connector on here. So I'll go like this. I'll go ahead and give it about 3/8 of an inch, and then pull that guy off, and that worked well. And I want to put this eyelet on here. So I'm going to stick him in there. Okay, and he comes all the way up. And it's a little bit on the long side, but that's okay, because I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put him in there, and I'm going to crimp him. This is 10 to 12 here. So I'm going to crimp that in there. So now I've got some mechanical strength, but you can see I crimped it, but I can still move it around. So I'm going to try it again, see if I can go any tighter. It went a little tighter. And now it's stiff. It's not moving anymore when I pull on it. And that's great, but I'm still not happy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and melt some solder off here. And I'm going to put this in my teeth like this. I'm going to put my gloves on. And I'm going to solder that. And I'm going to go ahead and take my soldering iron. And I'm going to tin the soldering iron, which means I'm just going to put a little bit of solder on it, wipe it off, and it makes it kind of nice and shiny. So then I'll take my solder, put the soldering iron right like this. So it's touching, put this back down, you can see. So it's touching the metal and touching the copper. And again, I'm going to lower this thing a little more so it's a little easier for me. And pull this over here just a little bit. So now you can see it. It's not hot enough there. Got some in there, but still not hot enough. So what I'm trying to do is get the solder to flow into the copper. And I finally did. Didn't do the best job. I get it hot enough to it really wants to flow in. So I did pretty good there. Now you can see that the solder flowed in, and mechanically it's basically soldered to that eyelet, and that's a better connection than a mechanical squeeze type connection. So I like that a lot better. So I'm going to show you something else. I'm going to take a piece of 16 gauge here. And so that's a little bit about crimping connectors, a little bit about soldering connectors, but let's do a little more soldering and let's show you shrink wrap. So let's say I want to join two wires together, and I'm going to cut these about, an inch, and twist them like this so that all the strands are good. Twist this like this so all the strands are good. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut a piece of shrink tubing, and shrink tubing, a little more than I need. What shrink tubing is it's a shrinkable coating that once I solder this together, I can put on there and it'll insulate it from touching ground. So I'm going to stitch this together like this. So I stitch this in line, and Ford in particular, I've seen in their manuals, this is a factory accepted method of soldering, is twisting those together like that. And once again, I'm going to take my solder, get a piece off there. And put that right under there. Again, I'm going to try and get the camera down a little more so you can see a little bit better. So here's my solder. Yeah, I got a nice job, got a nice joint. So you can see, hopefully you can see, put my hand underneath it, that that joint is completely soldered, and if I yank on it, it's going to rip the wire apart before it takes that apart. So I may do another one just to make sure you saw it well enough the first time. And then here's the shrink tubing. I'll pull the shrink tubing over and pull it over quick so in case it wants to get melted there. And I got my little propane butane torch. I got to pull this guy down here in the back, this guy right here. Pull him down, push the button. There, it's lit. Oh, went off again. And I push this guy and it holds it on. And so now what I'm going to do is watch the shrink tubing. As I heat it up, it'll just shrink right down onto the wire. You gotta be careful you don't burn it. I come from the other side. A little bit hot there. And this is probably slightly big for 16 gauge wire. Actually, it's not. It did really nice. So if you look at that really close, it gives us a really nice insulated coating, nice coating on that. So there's no chance that that solder connection touches ground. This is the best. This is the best connection, best going. I'm way more happy with this than anything else. We'll do one more, just so you can see it. So I'll cut another piece apart here, go back about an inch to 3/4 of an inch, so I can stitch this together. And again, I like to have my gloves off for this part, but I'll put them back on when I go to solder. So I'll twist this together, and I'll stitch these together. Just kind of twisting them in line. I forgot to put my shrink tubing on. Let's get some shrink tubing on there first. So I'll get my shrink tubing on there. I know, you're sorry. Mr. What are you doing? You forgot the shrink tubing. Why didn't you speak up? Just kidding. And I'll get this guy on here. And then I'll stitch these two together. So it gives them a little bit of mechanical strength. Then I'm going to put my gloves on and we'll solder this. Soldering iron's real hot. If you touch any of the metal parts on it, you're going to be burned. Please don't. Tin that thing up a little bit. So what I like to do is put the soldering iron right underneath it. It flows right in. Put the iron down. You can see right there that it's soldered really, really nicely. Quickly put my shrink tubing over it. And then take my torch. And heat it up. And it shrinks down onto it. There we go. So that's pretty nice. Really nicely on there. And in fact, if you look at the end, if I can get it to focus there, you can see that ends are really nice and snug. So that's a really nice solder joint. So showing you how to crimp on. So I'm going to show you another one that's called a tap connector. This is a tap connector right here. And let's say I have a wire and I want to bring another wire into it. Well, I can take a razor blade and cut it off and then wrap it and solder it. That works. Or this is called a tap connector. And what it does is it just crimps down over that, cuts the insulation, hits the copper. So I just stick it in there like this, right in there, and I just snap it together with a, hit it with a pair of pliers. Let me grab a pair of pliers. So maybe you can see it crimping down in there. So I'll squeeze it together with a pair of pliers, and it should get in there and lock onto it. Yeah, so it's locked onto it. And then what I do is I can take my 16 gauge shielded connector. This is a male 16 gauge shielded connector. I'll get it to focus on it. And I can take this and I can plug this in right like that. Hopefully. Yeah, there we go. I pushed it in. So now what I've got is a really tight shielded connector. So it's biting into this wire, and then I can attach a wire out here, which I can crimp, or I could take a razor blade, I could crimp it and then take the razor blade, cut the plastic back and solder it if I want. But that's actually really, really tight. That's called a tap connector. So that's when you want to grab power or ground out of a existing wire. You can squeeze that down on, plug this in. Okay, so that's pretty cool. That's a tap connector. All right, so I've shown you stripping pliers. Oh, there's one other type of pliers I want to show you that's really fun, and that's this one. I'm going to unplug the soldering iron because we're done with that. The one here that is really cool is these are kind of cool. These are a certain type of stripper that you put the wire in it like that, and it grabs it, and watch what it does. It strips the insulation off. Oop, got it snagged in there. Strips that insulation right off. And so I'll do it again. This has got a shear on it. I think it's got a shear, so I can cut it out. Yeah. So it's got a shear down here. It's got some crimps down here, and it'll strip right here. So I can go like this, and I can adjust how much it strips there. So I can put this guy in like that, grab it like this, and it pulls off the insulation. So these are really nice. It does a really nice job for certain types of things, but I can, again, I can adjust this right here. So to take it, get it to take off more insulation than that. All right, so we've shown you a number of different cutting, crimping, stripping tools. We've shown you how to solder inline and use shrink tubing. We've shown you what a tap connector is. Shown you a little bit about soldering, the soldering iron. I think I got it. I think I got everything. So here's just a nice kit that we have that shows the red is 18 to 20 gauge, the blue is 14 to 16, and the yellow is 10 to 12. Sorry, this is red is 16 to 22 gauge. That's 16 to 22. This is 14 to 16. This is 10 to 12. Butt connectors, eyelets, male and female spades, slot connectors, etc. And then here's a set of just shielded red, blue, and yellow. So 10 to 12, 14 to 16, 16 to 22 shielded male connectors that go in conjunction with tap connectors. Or here's a tap connector set that I just bought, 10 to 12, 14, 16, 16, 22 with their shielded connectors as well. So lots of stuff, different lengths of shrink tubing, etc. And I'll show you one other thing. So the one other thing I want to show you is what we call split loom. And split loom is really great because it's got a split down it, and we can put this over a group of wires and give ourselves a plastic insulated coating, so that's sort of abrasion resistant. This is for obviously something really large like a heater hose, but it gives us some abrasion resistance and keeps our wires all together. We can electrical tape our wires, and that works fine, but the split loom is really, really nice to keep them all organized and, again, keep them from rubbing against things that are going to wear through the insulation. Stuff's inexpensive. We have lots of different sizes, etc. Okay, that should do it for now. Thanks for your attention, and that is all we got.